Kyle Busch, Rowdy. Honestly, a defining driver in the history of NASCAR. One of the greatest we will ever see. And in 2024, we'll see him for his 20th full Cup season. He has won 63 Cup races, most out of active drivers. He has won 2 Cup championships, tied for the most out of active drivers. And he has won a grand total of 0 Daytona 500s. It's the last jewel on his crown of a career. How did this happen? That's the question I think a lot of people are wondering, how a driver as great as Busch can't win NASCAR's greatest race. Well, to start out with, Busch would begin like any other driver, as a rookie. In 2005, at 20 years old, he would make his first start in the Great American Race, and he would be caught up in an early wreck and finish in the 30s. The next year, he was up front all day. He ran really well, and Hendrick Motorsports overall was the best overall team in the race. But, well, while running in the top 10 with a couple laps to go, he would be black flagged for aggressive driving, and with 5 to go, he'd be asked to go down pit road. This would end his day again. But 2007, his last year in Hendrick, this could have been the one. It could be the first that got away. He was probably the 3rd or 4th best out there all day. It was clear that Tony Stewart and his brother Kurt Busch were the 2 best out there, but when both of them got collected in a wreck, he would inherit the lead. And he would race up front for the majority of the night, a night that would see a green-white checker finish. With 1 to go, he was second right behind Mark Martin, and on the front stretch, he tried to make a move, but Martin could defend it well. And on the super stretch, instead of him making the move to pass Mark Martin's Army car, it would be Kevin Harvick, as Busch was too late in jumping up to block the run and possibly get the push by him. He'd end up wrecking out of 4, and for the 3rd straight year, not win the Daytona 500. But maybe a move to Joe Gibbs Racing would add a spark that could get him the win. In 2008, he had led a total of 9 laps going into that race in the 3 500s previous. But he broke out, dominating the opening 3/4 of the race, leading 86 of the first 161 laps. Unfortunately, he would never get the lead again. He worked well all day with Tony Stewart, and would pit and get caught up in the back, but then make his way back up. Until again, he would have to go down pit road. And with 22 to go, he would make his fatal error. He would slide through his pit stall, have to back up, and lose precious time. While he clawed back up, he did jump the final restart down onto the bottom underneath the yellow line, and for that had to give up the lead, and other than maybe pushing Stewart to a win, which ended up not happening, he was irrelevant for the rest of the restart. 09 saw him turn it up a notch. He was even better, leading 88 of the opening 123 laps. With around 70 to go, he would pit, just having a normal stop. But on this round of pit stops would be the catalyst of his impending doom, as Dale Earnhardt Jr. would screw up on one of his stops. This would give him a penalty, putting him a lap down. When he was furiously trying to get back on the lead lap and also try and race the rain, well, pandemonium broke out.
And all of those cars are cars that had made green flag stops prior to that caution. Boy, Brian Vickers, Dale Earnhardt Jr., that ain't going to work, boys.
Vickers hard.
Here we
Kyle
go.
Busch, the dominant car of the day, in the wall.
That was wrong.
And 10 cars sliding, slamming into the infield.
Jimmy Johnson, totally uncalled for. Totally.
I don't care who you are. That was just wrong.
Caution is out. McMurray was a contender. He's all torn up. And the dominant car of the day, that of Kyle Busch, is a victim of this pileup.
Again, another great chance at winning the Great American Race, gone. And in 2010, he'd just become another dude again. He wasn't the dominant guy like in 08 or 09, and he was pretty much irrelevant. In 2011, with the 2-car draft being new, he ended up in an early wreck and basically had to spend all day recovering from the early issues. 2012, he's just flat out MIA. Maybe the Gen 6 era could spark something, as in 2013, the new car would race in its first points event. And he ran top 5 to 10 for the opening of the race. With 50 to go, he'd also worked his way back up to second with his teammate Denny Hamlin. And it looked like he and Toyota were going to skate on to another possible victory. Unfortunately, JGR's engines decided to leave about 50 laps early. Matt Kenseth would go down with engine issues, and only about 2 or so laps later, Kyle Busch would go down with engine issues, relegating him to a 34th place finish. The next year, well, he led early, but he also really only was the best car early. He was completely outclassed and outmatched in the night portion of the race, and by the end of the night, his highlight was ending up backwards. 2015 would be a turning point in his career, though. In the Xfinity opening race at Daytona, he would have an insanely hard wreck. His lower right leg would receive a compound fracture, which I'm just letting you know now, don't look up what that looks like. It's nasty. And his left foot would also have a fracture. While Busch would recover and end up winning the Cup Championship, again, a day before the Cup race was even run, Kyle Busch would be taken out of contention. Now, 2016 and his return to the Daytona 500 was a pretty consistently good day. Again, he led in the first half of the race, but ended up being a cog in the Toyota machine by the end of the race. Many remember the finish of this event, but the problem for Busch is that he could have been the one making the moves. On the front stretch, he had the opportunity to jump up top in front of Denny Hamlin. He didn't take it. And by the time they got to 3 and 4, he was boxed in. He couldn't make a move. And he ended up finishing right behind one of the best finishes in Daytona 500 history. Now, 2017 was a changing for NASCAR. You had new drivers, you had new rules, and one of these was the implementation of stages and stage cautions. And he won the first stage. It would be his first win of any kind in the Great American Race. But during a cycle of green flag pit stops, he was riding at the tail end of the lead lap before the leaders would go in. But because of a tire going down on his end, he would crash right up into everybody behind him and end another shot at the 500. He wrecked early in 2018, so 2019 would be the next real good shot he'd have at winning the big day. He was leading with the second to last restart, but as the field was wrecking behind him, his teammate, again Denny Hamlin, would be a nose ahead. On the final restart, it would end up being Hamlin pulling ahead as the leader, and Joey Logano putting Kyle Busch up to dry. Joey getting under him and shuffling him out would break his momentum and would break him out of contention. So once more, we would enter another decade with Busch having a goose egg in the wins column in this race. He would run up front for the 2020 event on a Monday and be in the main pack for most of it, but his engine blowing at the end of the day would take any chance of him making a charge at the end. And at least it started a funny meme. I guess that's positive. In 21, he would survive an early wreck, and that huge delay that followed after it. He was one of the few cars that was unscathed and could race up front. He was in the single file line, leading to destruction, at the finish at least, and was 6th in line at the white flag. But again, he'd be shuffled out. And to be completely honest, this was out of the frying pan and into the fire, literally, as he was part of one of the most fiery wrecks in recent memory. And so, we lead to the next-gen era we are in today. This would start out, and he'd be part of a big one, the Harrison Burton flip. But once more, Busch would end up being stuck in the 2x2 gridlock, and he'd have to wait another year. And this is the year that I think have made many pay attention to this storyline. What I think has honestly made this a bigger deal than people otherwise would have. See, this stemmed off the fact that Kyle Busch would leave Joe Gibbs Racing and go to Richard Childress Racing in the number 8 car. But because he had to go to a backup car in this race, he'd have to use Austin Dillon's backup, which, when you looked at the up-close shots, you could see a 3 underneath the 8. The possibility of Kyle Busch taking the 3 back to victory lane in the Daytona 500, it was amazing to see. And while he got caught speeding early and was in the lower half of the field, he and Dillon would draft up through the pack. And with 4 to go, they made the move. The Cush push, as I like to call it, was what Kyle Busch would receive, and he'd be pushed all the way out to the lead. Unfortunately, with the caution coming out for Daniel Suarez, Busch would lead at the 500th mile for the first time in this race, but unfortunately it would not be the end of the race for him. So, they'd have to go to a green-white checker. The first one, he would get out ahead, but because he didn't block Joey Logano, he would be shuffled back, and the wreck that happened right after it would pin him back there for the final green-white checker. Restarting 6th on row 3, he would be running 3rd at the white and in the corner, and he was clearly in contention for the win until he was taken out in the final wreck of the night. And that leads us to the present, 2024. And many are looking at Busch as the sentimental favorite at this point. Many are hearkening back to Dale Earnhardt, 20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration. And while he hasn't been in 20 Daytona 500s, many are looking at the fact that RCR has had these kind of moments before, like when the 3 won 20 years after Dale Earnhardt's 500. And it's really taken over the storylines of this race. So I want to know from you, what do you think is going to be in store this year for Kyle Busch? Is he going to win, or do you think he just doesn't get it? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel for more great and fun NASCAR content. Thank you so much to all my channel members for your continued support, and until next time, have a good one.